Terry Fields, who was the Labour MP and a militant supporter from Liverpool Broad Green, refused to pay the poll tax and served 58 days in Walton prison because of it. Roy Hattersley moved at the Labour Party NEC that Terry be expelled, and was advised that wasn't probably a good idea whilst he was in prison. You make him a martyr, wait till he comes out. This was in the summer of 1991. So when Terry came out of prison, it came back to the National Executive, and Roy Hattersley moved and Claire Short seconded that my name be added because I was the next one that was saying I was going into prison. And therefore the decision to investigate me was on the basis of bringing the Labour Party into disrepute by breaking the law. Well, it was the biggest civil disobedience of the 20th century by a country mile. In the 1980s, in England and Wales, in every year, in all the magistrates' courts put together, there were 2 million cases a year that went through the magistrates' courts. Between April 1990 and September 1993, on top of that 2 million of ordinary cases that went through the magistrates' courts, the number of individual cases of people who had been unable or unwilling to pay the poll tax and were then taken to court was 25,016,283. By a country mile, it was the biggest social movement, and it got rid of Margaret Thatcher. In November 1990, she was forced to resign. The trigger was a European discussion, but prior to that, I remember the Daily Express running an article naming 78 Tory MPs whose constituencies were so engaged about the poll tax that they would lose their seats. There was a fear, in fact, in April 1990, 5 days after the so-called poll tax riots in London, the Tories were 26 points behind Labour.
Implausible promises don't win victories. I'll tell you what happens with impossible promises. You start with far-fetched resolutions. They are then pickled into a rigid dogma, a code. And you go through the years sticking to that, outdated, misplaced, irrelevant to the real needs, and you end in the grotesque chaos of a Labour council hiring taxis to scuttle around the city, handing out redundancy notices to its own workers.
But it led on directly to my own expulsion and the beginnings of expulsions of militant supporters and later the left in general from Labour, because Neil Kinnock's position was the only place you can change the poll tax is in Parliament, but in Parliament, once it became law, that was the end of the opposition.